Well, I promised that one day the cocktail intros would be back, and today is the day. This is a Oaxacan remedy, and today we're talking about the 5 rookies that you absolutely need to target in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Let's get to work. All right, before we get into this, first things first, couple housekeeping rules we need to go over. Number one, it would be a little bit chalky of me and kind of boring to just list off a whole bunch of first-round picks, so I am not listing any first-rounders in my top 5. Obviously, a lot of them are going to be heavily targeted. In fact, I would target a lot of them before I even took some of the guys on this list, but I feel like it's more entertaining to talk about people that are drafted after the first round, the ones that people actually need to do some research on. So no first rounders. Doesn't mean that I'm not considering the first rounders at all. I just feel like it's a little bit boring to talk about names that everybody already knows. And number 2, just because I have these guys listed as values in Dynasty doesn't mean that they don't have incredible value in other formats as well, particularly, things like best ball on Underdog, redraft, any other format you play. A lot of these rookies are going to make up my teams in virtually every format I play because I tend to get a lot of value out of rookies that are intrinsically undervalued. So when I'm talking about these guys, I am going to be mentioning some other formats here and there, like best ball. And best ball is a format that also really rewards you for doing research on rookies and getting them super late in the draft because you don't really have to focus on trying to time, starting them at the right time in a best ball format. If they pop off, you just get the points. You don't have to worry about starting a lineup and, worrying about injuries or, again, trying to time committees and stuff like that. If you're really good at doing off-season research and you draft these rookies and they pop off, you're just going to get the points. So best ball, it's not like it's a more forgiving format, but it just kind of rewards people that do more off-season research that are really good at drafting, and that's what we're talking about today. So when they have best ball value, I'll point it out, but again, the main format we're talking about today is Dynasty. So why don't we kick this thing off with number 5 on my list, and this is a tight end that isn't really getting a whole lot of publicity because he happened to be in the same draft class as Kyle Pitts, but in most other years, he would have been a much bigger name in his class. Of course, talking about Penn State's very, very talented Pat Fryar. One of the hardest things to do in fantasy football, regardless of format, it can be Dynasty, it can be best ball, it can be anything, is finding and predicting the undervalued tight ends for that season. Usually in any given year, there's maybe 5 to 6 tight ends going into that season that you can rely on to be productive from week to week. It's a very, very thin position group. And so being able to predict the next one that can kind of be part of that, not even elite group, but just above average group, that gives you an advantage because you're getting a quality player at a position that most teams are not going to have quality players in, except you're getting that quality player in later rounds. And the difficulty in predicting the tight end position is even harder in Dynasty because tight ends are usually one of the position groups that take the longest for players to kind of become productive. Even elite players like Gronk and Jimmy Graham back in the day, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, most of them were not elite producers as rookies and sometimes even as second-year players, and it took a little while for them to really get going. And so when I look at Pat Fryar from Penn State, he is my investment in, 2 or 3 years down the road of potentially having a very high-quality tight end, again, at one of the thinnest position groups in fantasy football. Kyle Pitts is going to be the easy one to bet on because he's Kyle Pitts. He's amazing, but Fryar to me was the clear number 2 tight end in this class, and in most years, he would have been the best tight end in this class. I thought he was a first-round prospect. I think he's extremely versatile. He's a great blocker, really good route runner, very underrated athlete, like not just deceptive speed, but actual speed, and let alone he's got really good ball skills too. I think skill set wise, he has the potential to become a Travis Kelce-ish type player. And I'm not saying he's going to be Travis Kelce, because Kelce is really inarguably one of the 3 or 4 greatest tight ends to ever play the game. So I'm not going to automatically assume he's going to be that level of player. But in terms of skill set and versatility, I think he shares a lot of similar qualities. When you look at his fit specifically within Matt Canada's offense, the new offensive coordinator for the Steelers, historically, Canada's kind of shifted his philosophy from team to team everywhere he's been, just kind of based on the personnel that he has. But one of the trends that we can really pick up on when you watch him, at Pittsburgh, LSU, Northern Illinois, pretty much everywhere he's been, he really likes 12 personnel and he really likes running the ball. The fact that they took Fryar, who's a really, really good run blocker, even when he was playing through that torn labrum, he was still one of the best blocking tight ends in all of college football, again, as I said before. And really, their only other tight end on the roster that you can write home about is Eric Ebron, who's not a very good blocker. That, to me, signals that almost by default, Fryar is going to get a lot of snaps because he's going to be their best blocking tight end from day one. When they're in 12 personnel, Fryar is going to be the Y. I wouldn't be surprised if Ebron is used as more of a big slot or a kind of a move tight end, which also has a role in this offense. But really, Matt Canada, I think, wants to emphasize his true Y tight end and kind of have that be a focal point when they get into all their play action stuff, which has also been pretty heavily emphasized by Matt Canada everywhere he's been as an OC. He loves play action. So overall, when I look at Fryar, he is not an investment into 2021, but rather an investment into 2022 and 2023 and beyond. He was the second best tight end in this class, arguably the most versatile tight end in this class, and they call him Baby Gronk for a reason. He is exceptionally talented, and he's in a really good situation, at least in my opinion, for him to become a focal point of that offense in probably a couple of years. Next up on our list at number 4 is a running back that I think is criminally underrated. I think he was massively undervalued throughout the draft process. He was one of my favorite backs in the entire class. I think he ended up in an absolutely perfect situation for him to potentially be a star, and that is Ohio State's Trey Sermon winding up in San Francisco. Now, here's my thing with Trey Sermon. Kyle Shanahan does not typically invest in a running back early. When you look at his history, pretty much every single team that he's been with, whether he's as a position coach, a coordinator, head coach, running back is not a position that he invests a high pick into because he hasn't really needed to. With his system, he has been able to, maybe it's a bad word, but manufacture rushing production with pretty much anyone he throws in that backfield. It really hasn't mattered very much who his running backs have been. And so for him to invest a 3rd round pick in Trey Sermon when running back wasn't really that big of a need for the Niners, if at all, that tells me how much he really loves Trey Sermon as a player. And to be honest, it's pretty easy to see the fit. I mean, you watch any Ohio State game last year where he got a heavy workload, which it kind of took him a little while as a transfer to work himself into that lead back role, but once he did, they really emphasized a lot of the same things that Kyle emphasizes, which is that outside zone run game out of 12 personnel. You look at the Northwestern game, you look at the Clemson game, pretty much every time he got a big workload, it was a heavy dose of outside zone, and he's very, very good at running it. He's got great eyes, great lateral mobility for his size, and he uses that size to break a lot of tackles as well. He's not your typical slasher that's going to be explosive but still go down on first contact. He's going to actually be able to make somebody miss or just outright bury a linebacker if they meet him in the hole because he's 215, 220 pounds. Just, again, his versatility as a player to get something out of nothing, even if the run fit is sound, he can just run over people. Not to mention the vision, the mobility, the receiving ability. He's kind of a do-it-all back, and the only thing that he's missing is just top-end breakaway speed, but he's not even slow. Like, you compare his burst to some other running backs that Kyle has worked with in the past, like Alfred Morris, and he looks like a freaking track star in comparison. So I know that the 49ers backfield is loaded, and I know it's deep, but there's a reason that Kyle invested a 3rd rounder in this kid, and it's because his skill set is extremely versatile. He's a perfect fit for the offense, and whether Jimmy G is starting or whether it's Trey Lance, I don't really care because he's going to be effective regardless of who the quarterback is. Sermon was one of my 4 top-graded running backs in this entire class. He went to a perfect destination, and if there is one running back that I absolutely want to come out of every dynasty draft with, it is Trey Sermon. And that brings us to number 3 on our list, to another running back, another very underrated running back. Khalil Herbert from Virginia Tech was not really talked about as much as the big 4. Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne did not get nearly the same coverage as those guys, but in the end, he was just as productive, if not more productive than all of them, and that's for a very good reason. He's really damn good. Herbert is one of my other top 4 graded running backs in this entire rookie class, and he didn't go until day 3 of the draft, which was really a shocker to me. And again, he's another one of these guys where I know he went to a loaded backfield. He's competing with David Montgomery. He's competing with Tariq Cohen. I get it. He's not really a true investment in 2021 for me, like some of the other guys on this list, like Trey Sermon. I'm absolutely going to be drafting in best ball this year. As I mentioned, I'm going to be drafting him in redraft. Like every single format, I'm taking Trey Sermon. Khalil Herbert is more of a pure dynasty play, and to a degree, a best ball play as kind of injury insurance if Montgomery goes down, because again, best ball will give you credit for his production regardless of whether you put him in a starting lineup or not, because there are no starting lineups in best ball. But anyway, I'm on a tangent here. There's certain formats where Khalil Herbert works and where he doesn't, but just when you look at his skill set as a zone runner, the vision, the burst, the very underrated contact balance and ability to break tackles for his size, the receiving ability. I know that he's an older prospect. I know that he was a 5th-year transfer and kind of I don't want to say a 1-year wonder. He wasn't a 1-year wonder, but he kind of put himself on the map in his last year in college. I don't really care about that, and I know that a lot of people see those as red flags, but for me, it just comes down to, are you a good football player or not? And Khalil Herbert is one of the 4 best running backs to come out in this draft class to me. He might only get 6 or 7 touches a game this year because Montgomery is still there and Cohen is still there, but in those 6 or 7 touches, I think he's going to be so incredibly dynamic that it's going to be hard for coaches to justify keeping him off the field. And I wouldn't be surprised if he works his way up to maybe 8, 9, possibly even 10 touches a game by the end of the season, and almost kind of turn it into a true committee, like a true, almost turn it into a 40-30-30 split between the 3 running backs rather than Montgomery just getting the overwhelming number of carries. I think he's going to be taking a lot of snaps from these other backs and possibly set you up in 2022 and beyond to take on an even bigger role than that. Remember, Montgomery only has 2 years left on his deal right now, so after 2021, he's going to be going into the final year of his contract, and he's going to be extremely tradable if he has a big year, or worst case scenario, Herbert's only going to have to deal with that true carry split for 1 extra season after that. So again, when you're looking at it from a dynasty perspective, you're not just planning for this season and next season, you're planning for everything beyond that. And if you really want to invest a later round pick into Khalil Herbert to be your guy that could possibly emerge in 2023 and 2024 and be a very, very valuable piece for you, kind of like Aaron Jones, when I look at Jones's career path, it took him a few years to really come on and be that kind of guy. I wouldn't be surprised if Khalil Herbert is the same type of back. So I really do think that he's worth the investment now. I know that the situation really scares people, and so if you want to stay away from him in a traditional redraft league, fine, go ahead. But in particular in Dynasty and in Best Ball, I absolutely think he is worth targeting and targeting heavily. And now, at number 2 on this list, this is a guy that I've talked about seemingly endlessly this spring and summer. If you followed me pretty much anywhere, whether it's on this channel, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on my podcast, the Bootleg Football Podcast with my buddy EJ Snyder. I'll leave a link down to that in the description below. We do episodes every single week. And, at this point, I'm still not sick of talking about Terrace Marshall from LSU and how much I love him as a prospect, so I really hope that you're not sick of hearing about him. Now, Marshall was one of my highest graded receivers in this entire draft class, at least in terms of pure film grade when he was at LSU. If I remember correctly, I had him as my 3rd or 4th rated receiver overall. So again, I was very high on him. But when I saw that he went to the Panthers, he immediately shot towards the top of my list of rookies to target in Dynasty, specifically because of the offense that he's going to. Panthers offensive coordinator Joe Brady is already very familiar with Marshall. He used to coach him at LSU, and I think that Marshall's going to be able to walk in there day one and immediately already know his role in the offense, because it's probably going to be the same role that he played at LSU. He is going to be the prototypical X receiver for them. And ironically, I actually have a copy of their install playbook from that one year that Joe Brady was with Terrace Marshall at LSU. And there's a play in there that they really like to run in the high red zone, pretty much out to about the 40-yard line, that they ironically called Panther. And that was pretty much Terrace Marshall's play. Pretty much every time they called that as a shot play for them, again, in that high red zone out to about the 40-yard line, regardless of where Jamar Chase was, regardless of where Justin Jefferson was, they were really looking for Terrace Marshall there with the one-on-one outside, because when you're going trips right or trips left to the field, the number one receiver to the field is not typically going to get the double, because especially in college where the hashes are wider, that receiver is typically going to be so far away from the quarterback that if they want to take a shot down that boundary, it is a very low percentage ball. You have to throw it really far and really accurately from that far hash to really be able to fit it in there. But with a guy like Marshall, who has exceptional ball skills, and remember, he led all of college football in contested catch rate last year at about 82%, it was kind of a cheat code. You know, the fact that he wasn't getting doubled, you could go trips right to the field and just chuck it down there, and he was going to come down with it. Not to mention the fact that he's also really, really fast. He's a good route runner. I just really, really like him in that prototypical X role, and the Panthers don't really have anybody like that. So I think that he's immediately going to step in and be their X and be that big play threat when they're going into 3-by-1. You know, you're going to have DJ Moore in the slot. You're going to have Robbie Anderson probably as the isolated receiver backside. But Terrace Marshall, again, when they're going 3-by-1, that's the dude that I really expect to get the ball, because Joe Brady, at least historically, was trying to force feed him the ball every time they got in those looks. He's a very, very good receiver that unfortunately was kind of lost in the depth chart in the one year that LSU had a very, very good quarterback. And then once Burrow left, he kind of became the guy, but the quarterback play fell off by a lot. Not to mention he was also playing through some bumps and bruises and everything like that. So the stars didn't really align for Terrace Marshall. But again, I believe in the talent. I believe in the film, and I believe in his knowledge and fit in this offense. I think he's an exceptionally undervalued player, and I wouldn't be surprised if Marshall kind of asserts himself, maybe not as the number one option overall in this offense, but at least gives DJ Moore a run for his money. And especially down in the red zone, I think that he's going to be the primary red zone target over every single other receiver on this team. And by the way, I advocate for drafting Terrace Marshall in any format, not just Dynasty, but I do think that in Dynasty in particular, because you get to keep him forever, he is a very, very undervalued asset. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to number one on our list, the top-rated rookie that I'm going to be targeting in every single league that I'm in. Really, regardless of format, I don't care if it's best ball and underdog, I don't care if it's Dynasty, I don't care if it's redraft. I'm going to be targeting this dude in every single league that I'm in, and that is Elijah Moore from the New York Jets. When you look at this new offense for the Jets, and in particular Elijah Moore's fit within it, it is hard not to be extremely excited. Mike LaFleur comes from that, typical Shanahan background. They're emphasizing outside zone, they're emphasizing bootlegs, but the thing that's kind of, at least among the entire Shanahan tree, that's really been emphasized among all these guys is jet motion, and how jet motion can really interact with the run game, the difficulties that it can really put on a front seven in terms of being able to fit the run effectively, how it sets up easy completions in the pass game, how it gets other players other than running backs involved in carrying the ball. All of that jet motion, whether we see it with Robert Woods, we see it with Deebo Samuel, a little bit of Brandon Ayuk, maybe some of the tight ends every now and then. Aaron Jones has done it. Really, every single Packers running back has done it at some point. All of that jet motion is a critical part of this system, and Elijah Moore, at least to me, is going to be the jet motion guy in the Jets offense. Even when we look at how he was used at Ole Miss, they were giving him carries off jet motion because he's extremely explosive. He gets to the edge quickly. He's got great vision, great contact balance. He is a natural runner with the ball in his hands, and he's so much more than just a typical receiver. I just classify him personally as a weapon. I don't really think it matters how you're getting the ball in his hands, just like I don't really think it matters how you're getting the ball in Debo's hands over in San Francisco. Just get him the ball. So whether he's getting carries, he's getting screens, you're taking deep shots to him down the field. He's also a very, very good route runner. I think he's a little bit further along in terms of receiver skills, or at least quote unquote receiver skills, than Debo Samuel was coming out of South Carolina. I just think when you look at his total package, it doesn't really matter where his touches are coming from as long as he's getting touches. And I think he's so gifted that he's going to get a lot of touches. Yes, I know that Denzel Mims is there. I know that Corey Davis is there. It's a little bit of a crowded receiver room, but that's not really stopping me from investing heavily in Elijah Moore, and not just in Dynasty, but in any format. He's another one of these guys that I'm taking in pretty much every best ball draft on Underdog that I can, because I think that his ceiling for points from week to week is very, very high with his versatility. But again, I'm not really scared off from the situation, because usually to me, kind of my philosophy on fantasy football is inevitably talent will win out. A better player is going to end up getting more snaps than other players on the team. That's just kind of how football works. It's the ultimate meritocracy. There's a few exceptions every now and again, but most of the time coaches are coaching for their jobs, and so they're not going to risk not putting the best player on the field. And from what it sounds like, Elijah Moore has been their best receiver on the field pretty much all of summer so far. If you're doing your dynasty drafts, if you're doing your best ball drafts, I would take Elijah Moore now before we get to training camp, because I think with each passing day, the news on him is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then he's going to light up preseason, and everybody's going to see what he can really do, and it's going to be hard to get him at a value. So if you're going to get him now, because I would honestly be surprised if by the end of his rookie year, Elijah Moore is not a star. I think he is absolutely tailor-made for the modern NFL. I think he's a perfect fit for the Jets offense, and I expect him sooner rather than later to become a household name. All right, and that is the end of the road for us today. I hope you guys got a little bit of solid information out of this, just talking about a few rookies that I really like outside of the obvious first-round talents. Talking mostly about Dynasty, a little bit about best ball. I'm actually going to be doing a lot more best ball content as well over the next couple months. That is a format that is very near and dear to my heart because it prioritizes good drafting and good off-season research, which are two things that I'm really good at. I'm not so good at trades and I'm not so good at waiver wires, but that's cool because best ball emphasizes other skills in the fantasy community. So yeah, best ball it's really, really fun, and I highly recommend you guys try it. If you do want to check out Underdog and kind of get a feel for best ball, you can hit the link down in the description below. Use promo code Brett. That'll get you $25 free to use on the platform, which you can use for entries into best ball contests. I'll be doing a lot more best ball content if you're not familiar with the format, in addition to doing more dynasty stuff and maybe a little bit of redraft, some rankings here and there. A lot of fantasy stuff coming over the next couple months because right about now is when fantasy draft season really amps up. So I'm excited for that. I will be back next Wednesday, I believe, with another full Film Room episode. I'm trying to pump out as much stuff as I can in a short period of time that I've kind of been working on a little bit over the last several weeks. Again, thank you guys for being so gracious while I kind of took my midsummer break and recharged a little bit. It was really good for me to do that in a lot of ways. So I thank you guys for your support. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I'll be back in a few days. And until then, cheers. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode. And again, thank you to our sponsor for this week, HelloFresh. If you've watched this channel for a while, you know that I work a lot of hours, and actually I'm going to be hiring some help soon so that I can finally work less than 60 hours per week for once. But in the meantime, while my schedule is still impossibly busy, HelloFresh is my way to still cook good meals at home without sacrificing a whole lot of what little time I have left over. For me at least, because my house is kind of out of the way of everything, my average grocery store trip takes well over an hour, and that's not counting the time it takes to plan out my meals and put together shopping lists. But with HelloFresh, I just get all of the portioned out ingredients delivered right to my door, and every meal that I've had has come out amazing. HelloFresh also makes it easy to make all of their recipes too, just by following the instructions, even if you're relatively new to cooking or if you don't have a big, fully loaded kitchen. And keep in mind too that there are tons of other chef-curated recipes for you to choose from every single week on HelloFresh. even low-calorie, vegetarian, or pescatarian options. And on average, HelloFresh customers save 28% in cost compared to going to their local grocery store to buy the same ingredients to make the same meals. Plus, because each meal is portioned out perfectly, you're not buying a bunch of extra food that ends up going to waste, so HelloFresh is more sustainable as well. For someone like me that has a crazy schedule, HelloFresh has been a great way to still eat good food without spending a whole lot of time or money that I just don't have. And I know you're going to love it for that same reason too. So if you want to try it out for yourself just to get a taste of how convenient and easy it will make your life, please check them out at HelloFresh.com at the link in the description below. Use my code FilmRoom12 to get a total of 12 free meals, and that includes free shipping. Again, that is HelloFresh.com at that link below for 12 free meals with promo code FilmRoom12, including free shipping.